Every single time you learn a new chord on the guitar, or maybe decide to eat an apple instead of a donut, or
Yeah.
even just like scroll through another short video on your phone, your brain is literally physically changing its shape.
It is. It really is.
And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. Because for decades, the scientific consensus was basically that you were stuck with the brain you had by age 25.
Yeah, they really thought the hardware was just permanent.
Exactly, and they were completely wrong. So today, we're diving into the actual biology of how you change your mind. Literally.
And it fundamentally changes how we have to look at our daily behavior, honestly.
Oh, for sure.
Because when you realize that your actions aren't just, passing events, but they're actual physical construction projects happening inside your skull.
The stakes get way higher.
Exactly. The stakes of your daily routine become massive.
Which is the core of our mission today. We are pulling together some incredible research to give you a shortcut to understanding the biological mechanics of self-improvement.
It's a great stack of sources today, too.
It really is. We've got a comprehensive breakdown of the science of neuroplasticity. We've got a critical review from the behavioral architects on James Clear's massive bestseller, Atomic Habits.
That's a classic.
Right. Plus, Vibo Muris's neurological frameworks in dopamine detox. And then we're tying all of this science into a physical application using a 30-day home workout plan from Daily Burn.
So we're really going from the microscopic brain cells right down to, sweating in your living room.
That's the goal. We aren't just looking at what to do, we are dissecting the cellular reasons why change is just so hard and how you can actually engineer a better, more focused version of yourself.
I love that. Engineering yourself.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the historical dogma, I think, because until roughly the 1970s, neuroscience painted a pretty grim picture of aging.
Oh, it was incredibly bleak.
Right, like it was just downhill.
Yeah, the overarching belief was that the adult brain was a non-renewable organ. The dogma basically dictated that once you reached a certain age, your neural circuits were fixed.
Just locked in.
Exactly. You had a set number of neurons, and from that point forward, life was just this slow, inevitable process of cognitive decline.
Which is terrifying, honestly.
It is. And the medical assumption was that if you had a short attention span, or say, a deeply ingrained bad habit, your hardware was simply wired that way.
You were just stuck with whatever operating system you had managed to install by early adulthood.
Right. But what's fascinating here is that the clues to a much more dynamic reality were actually documented decades earlier. They were just largely ignored.
Wait, like how far back?
Back in the early 1900s, there was this scientist, Santiago Ramon y Cajal, who we now basically consider the father of modern neuroscience.
Okay, so he was looking at this way before the 70s.
Oh, way before. He was observing the nervous system through these really early microscopes, and he actually coined the term neuronal plasticity.
Wow. I had no idea the term was that old.
Yeah, he documented evidence of both degeneration and regeneration in the adult brain. He could physically see that the architecture was shifting.
But people didn't believe him.
Not really. Because it challenged that established mechanical view of the brain, his theories were highly controversial.
So they just brushed it under the rug.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It took until the late 20th century, with the advent of advanced neuroimaging, for the medical establishment to finally concede that the brain is entirely malleable.
Okay, so they could finally see it happening in real time.
Exactly. And now we categorize this adaptability into two main buckets: structural and functional neuroplasticity.
Let's look at the structural side first, because the evidence here moves from those microscopic observations to massive, undeniable physical changes.
The London taxi driver study.
Yes, the Eleanor Maguire study, it is the perfect illustration of this. For anyone who doesn't know, getting a license to drive a black cab in London is insane.
It's one of the hardest memory tests in the world.
Right, you have to pass this exam known as the knowledge. And it is brutal. You literally have to memorize the complex layout of roughly 25,000 streets.
25,000. And thousands of specific landmarks.
Yeah, it typically takes years of studying. So Maguire and her team used MRI technology to scan the brains of these drivers and then compared them to normal control subjects.
And the key here is they weren't just looking for better memory test scores.
Right, they were looking for anatomical differences in the brain itself.
And they found them. The gray matter in the posterior hippocampus of the taxi drivers had physically expanded.
That is just wild, like a muscle getting bigger.
Exactly like that. The hippocampus is the region of the brain that's heavily tasked with spatial memory and navigation.
So because they were using it so much.
Yeah, because these drivers were placing such an intense, sustained cognitive demand on this specific area, the brain responded by literally building more tissue.
Unbelievable.
The neurons grew more complex dendritic branches, and the vascular system in that area actually increased to support the new metabolic load. They structurally remodeled their brains to accommodate their environment.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, on a daily basis? Because obviously most of us aren't out here memorizing 25,000 streets in London.
True, but it means that every time you focus intensely on a new skill, you are triggering a similar structural response. Maybe a bit smaller, but it's happening.
Okay, so it applies to everyday stuff too.
Absolutely. For example, our sources point to this great research led by Sarah Lazar at Harvard. She looked at mindfulness meditation.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
Yeah, the study found that regular meditation physically increases cortical thickness in areas associated with attention and sensory processing.
So sitting still and focusing actually builds brain tissue.
Exactly. Sustained focus demands metabolic resources, and your brain just reinforces the areas being used most frequently.
That covers the structural changes perfectly, but functional plasticity is equally critical, I think.
Oh, definitely. It's the other side of the coin.
I like to visualize the brain as this dynamic, incredibly dense city grid.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. So if a major bridge goes out, which, in neurological terms would be something like brain damage from a stroke.
Right, a sudden loss of infrastructure.
Yeah, exactly. The traffic of the city doesn't just halt forever. The city naturally reroutes the flow using smaller side streets.
It finds a way.
Yeah. It might be really inefficient at first, but eventually a new, optimized path is established through repetition.
In the clinical literature, that specific mechanism is often called homologous area adaptation.
Homologous area adaptation, that's a mouthful.
It is, but we see this really rapidly in individuals who lose a primary sense, like sight or hearing.
Oh, right. Like how other senses get stronger.
Exactly. If the visual cortex is suddenly deprived of input from the eyes, that highly valuable neural real estate doesn't just go dormant.
The brain is too efficient for that.
Way too efficient. The brain actually repurposes those processing centers to handle auditory or tactile information. The actual function of the tissue transfers to adapt to the new sensory reality.
Okay, so here's the big question. If our biology is this adaptable, if our brains are so eager to physically remodel themselves based on our environment, why is it so agonizingly difficult to break a bad habit?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Like, if I consciously want my brain to adapt to craving a salad instead of craving ultra-processed junk food, why does my own biology fight me?
Well, that tension introduces the major biological roadblock to all this neuroplasticity, which is your dopamine system.
Ah, dopamine,
Yeah.
the usual suspect.
Always. And to understand why it fights you, we really have to correct a widespread misconception here. Thibaut Mirazzi's frameworks in dopamine detox tackle this head-on.
Because everyone gets dopamine wrong, don't they?
Completely. Dopamine is almost universally misunderstood as the pleasure chemical.
Right, people assume you eat the donut, dopamine is released, and you feel good. You experience pleasure.
But neurologically, dopamine is actually the molecule of anticipation. It is the molecule of more.
The molecule of more.
Yeah, it's a neurotransmitter whose primary function is to motivate you to seek out rewards. It spikes before you take the action. It's what drives the craving and the pursuit.
So it's the wanting, not the liking.
Exactly. And in an evolutionary context, this is what kept our ancestors alive. It propelled them to endure the hardship of foraging for food or, seeking a mate.
I have to push back a little here, though.
Sure. Yeah.
If seeking rewards is this deeply ingrained evolutionary survival mechanism, why are we suddenly treating it like a disease? Are we just supposed to suppress our natural instincts and live in a state of constant deprivation like bored monks?
No, we aren't trying to suppress the instinct at all. The problem isn't the instinct. The problem is an evolutionary mismatch.
A mismatch?
Yeah. Your dopamine system evolved in an environment of extreme scarcity. But today, you live in an environment of engineered hyperabundance.
Oh, I see.
Marketers, food scientists, app developers, they all understand this prediction error model of dopamine. They know your brain releases massive spikes of dopamine when a reward is novel or effortless.
And they totally exploit that.
Absolutely. They exploit it by designing endless feeds of short videos, hyper-palatable foods, constant push notifications.
So our ancient hardware is basically being flooded by modern stimuli it was never meant to handle.
Yes. And this constant bombardment physically rewires a region called the nucleus accumbens, which sits right at the heart of your reward circuitry.
Wait, it physically rewires it?
Yep. When you flood the nucleus accumbens with cheap, high-intensity dopamine on a daily basis, your brain tries to protect itself. It downregulates its own dopamine receptors.
It turns the volume down.
Exactly. So your baseline expectation for stimulation skyrockets.
Meaning normal, healthy activities just no longer register.
Right.
Reading a book, working on a complex project, or just going for a run suddenly feel unbearably tedious because they don't provide that engineered spike.
They can't compete with the superhighway.
We've paved a 10-lane superhighway straight to our bad habits, and the roads leading to our long-term goals are just these overgrown dirt paths.
That is the exact neurological trap. And the framework to escape it is what Maurice categorizes as a dopamine detox.
Okay, so how does that actually work? Because the word detox sounds a bit extreme.
Well, from a purely scientific standpoint, you aren't actually detoxing from dopamine. You need it to function. But you are resetting the baseline of your reward circuitry.
You're clearing the brush on those dirt paths.
Exactly. And the most critical step in this process is introducing friction.
Friction. Okay, so if the problem is that bad habits are too effortless, friction is the antidote.
Precisely. You have to construct physical barriers between yourself and the overstimulation.
Make it harder to get the cheap hit.
Right. If you're constantly distracted by your phone, relying on willpower is just a losing battle against your nucleus accumbens.
Yeah.
You will lose.
Willpower isn't enough.
Never. You have to put the phone in another room, you have to use software blockers, you have to increase the physical and cognitive steps required to access that superhighway.
And that resets the baseline.
Yeah, by starving the brain of that cheap stimulation, particularly in the first few hours of the morning, you force those dopamine receptors to upregulate again. You regain the ability to find motivation in essential, longer-term tasks.
So we use friction to close down the superhighway of cheap dopamine. The baseline resets, we've cleared the brush.
Right.
But how do we then actively pave the new roads? How do we intentionally direct our neuroplasticity toward the behaviors we actually want?
Now we're getting into the really practical side.
Yeah, this is where the behavioral psychology from James Clear's Atomic Habits perfectly intersects with the biology.
The review by the behavioral architects isolates this profound concept from Clear's work, which is the difference between goal-based and identity-based habits.
Oh, this is such a good distinction.
It really is. A goal is an external outcome, like saying, I want to lose 20 pounds. It's fragile. Once you hit a roadblock, the motivation just collapses.
Because a goal doesn't change how your brain predicts your behavior.
Exactly. But an identity shift does, saying, I am someone who prioritizes my health. That alters your internal predictive processing.
It changes who you believe you are.
Right. Identity sits at the very top of your cognitive hierarchy. When your actions don't align with your deeply held identity, it creates cognitive dissonance. So Clear argues that true behavior change is simply the process of building systems that provide evidence for this new identity.
And the architecture for those systems is based on his 4 laws of behavior change.
Yes, the 4 laws.
If you want to wire a new habit into your brain, you have to manipulate the habit loop by making the cue obvious, making the craving attractive, making the response easy, and making the reward satisfying.
And what is so brilliant about this framework is how it operates as the exact inverse of the dopamine management strategy we just discussed.
Yes, I love this part. When you lay the sources side by side, the friction concept from the dopamine detox is literally just Clear's rules for breaking a bad habit.
Make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, make it unsatisfying.
Exactly. Putting your phone in another room isn't just a random life hack. You are making the cue invisible and the response difficult.
You're engineering it.
You are systematically redesigning your environment to constrain your neuroplasticity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, though, the Behavioral Architects Review actually offered a critique of Atomic Habits.
Oh, really? What did they say?
They noted that the book can feel highly repetitive, like it constantly cycles through anecdote, theory, and application over and over.
Yeah, I can see that.
They questioned if this stylistic choice oversimplified the science just for the sake of, mass market appeal.
But wait, from a neurological perspective, that repetition isn't a stylistic flaw at all, is it? It's a biological requirement.
It is the absolute foundation of Hebbian learning. The axiom in neuroscience is, Neurons that fire together, wire together.
Fire together, wire together.
When you repeatedly perform an action or repeatedly engage with a framework like the 4 laws, your brain begins to myelinate that specific neural pathway.
Myelinate.
Yeah, it wraps the axon of the neuron in this fatty sheath called myelin. It acts exactly like insulation on an electrical wire.
Oh, so it makes the signal faster.
It makes it travel faster, way more efficiently. Clear's repetitive structure acts as cognitive training. It basically drills the framework into your predictive processing until it becomes an automatic lens through which you view your environment.
Understanding the mechanics of myelination and dopamine receptor downregulation, I mean, that gives us a great theoretical foundation.
It does.
But we need to look at how this plays out in a physical crucible. Let's apply this identity shift in environmental design to a tangible protocol.
The workout plan.
Exactly. The 30-day home workout plan from Daily Burn.
Starting an exercise routine is the classic example of where most people's systems just completely fail.
They really do.
They have the goal, like they want to get in shape, but they fundamentally misunderstand the biology of habit formation.
They violate the 3rd law of behavior change, which is make it easy.
Right. When someone decides to get fit, the instinct is always to go to the gym for this exhausting 2-hour session.
To just destroy themselves on day 1.
Exactly. They spike their cortisol, they suffer intense delayed onset muscle soreness, and their brain immediately associates the environment of the gym with physical punishment.
They made the response incredibly difficult and the immediate reward deeply unsatisfying.
And what happens? The brain's predictive machinery will actively resist returning to that environment.
It protects you from the pain.
Exactly. Now, the Daily Burn protocol succeeds because it intentionally bypasses this resistance.
Right. It requires 0 equipment. You literally just do it in your living room, and it only asks for 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week.
20 minutes completely eliminates the cognitive friction.
It's so short.
It is a threshold so low that your brain cannot reasonably manufacture an excuse to avoid it.
And the progression of the 30-day protocol is designed to train the nervous system before it truly taxes the muscular system.
That's the key. In week 1, the focus is purely on establishing the pathway.
You aren't pushing to failure?
No, you're doing basic bodyweight squats and wall push-ups for really short intervals. You are simply providing evidence for the new identity, which is, I am someone who works out.
And then week by week, it introduces progressive overload.
Right.
The intervals of work increase from 30 seconds to 40 seconds. The rest periods drop. The exercises become more complex, shifting to jump squats and full push-ups.
By week 4, you are executing a circuit that your cardiovascular system just couldn't have handled on day 1.
But more importantly, let's look at what is happening to the brain during those 20 minutes.
Yes. This is where the physical application loops perfectly back to the structural neuroplasticity we started with.
It all connects.
Our initial sources highlight the profound impact of aerobic exercise on brain morphology. When you engage in consistent physical exertion, particularly movements that elevate your heart rate.
Like the jump squats.
Exactly. Your body triggers the release of a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
BDNF, which is often referred to in the literature as miracle grow for the brain, right?
Miracle grow, yes, because it acts directly on the cellular level to promote neurogenesis.
The growth of new neurons.
Right, and it strengthens the synapses connecting them. Aerobic exercise increases peripheral blood flow, which initiates this whole cascade of chemical signals that cross the blood-brain barrier to stimulate BDNF production.
And the effects are highly localized to critical areas, aren't they?
Very localized. Exercise-induced BDNF leads to measurable increases in gray matter volume in the prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function, impulse control, and decision-making.
Wait, so by pushing through a 20-minute living room workout, you aren't just improving your cardiovascular health.
Not at all.
The BDNF release is physically bulking up the exact area of the brain required to maintain discipline in other areas of your life.
Yes. You are structurally upgrading your ability to focus and to resist the cheap dopamine we talked about earlier.
That is incredible.
It is, and furthermore, it aggressively targets the hippocampus, expanding that exact same spatial memory and learning center we saw in the London taxi drivers.
The physical exercise is the catalyst for the cognitive upgrade.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We are looking at a 30-day workout plan, but the literature, specifically a widely cited study from the European Journal of Social Psychology.
Ah, yes. The habit formation study.
Right. It demonstrates that the old myth of 21 days to form a habit is completely inaccurate.
It's totally false.
On average, it takes 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic.
For some complex habits, it can actually take up to 8 months.
Which, let's be honest, feels entirely daunting.
That sounds awful, yeah.
But when we view it through the lens of everything we've discussed today, the purpose of a 30-day protocol isn't to achieve permanent automaticity.
No, not at all.
The first 30 days are purely about surviving the friction.
Yes. It's about managing your environment so you don't quit while the neural pathway is still weak.
So if you can use the 4 laws to keep the barrier to entry low.
And detox your dopamine so you actually have the motivation to start.
Right. Then those first 30 days lay the heavy structural foundation. By week 4, the BDNF is flowing, the prefrontal cortex is engaged, the myelination has started.
And you've built the biological momentum to carry you through to day 66.
The neural roads are paved.
The traffic is naturally flowing toward the healthier behavior.
So to pull all of these threads together for you, the listener, you are not a finished product. Your brain is a highly adaptable, constantly shifting biological landscape.
Constantly shifting.
But the modern world is actively exploiting that adaptability, using cheap dopamine to wire your nucleus accumbens for distraction and lethargy.
And the way out isn't relying on fragile goals.
Or sheer willpower.
Right. It's about auditing your environment. It's about introducing severe friction to the bad habits and making the good habits so ridiculously easy, like a 20-minute bodyweight routine, that you basically can't fail.
You use physical movement to generate BDNF, and you use repetition to myelinate those new pathways until your identity actually shifts. You are the architect of your own biology.
This raises an important question, though.
Okay, what is it?
It is a concept we really have to extract from the reality of how plasticity functions. If structural neuroplasticity is a continuous process, and the evidence absolutely confirms that it never stops.
Right, it's happening right now.
Then biologically, there is no such thing as a neutral action.
Oh, wow. Every action is a vote.
Every single action is an architectural blueprint. Every time you succumb to the infinite scroll, you are physically reinforcing the neural circuitry of distraction.
You're making the bad road wider.
Yes. Every skipped workout strengthens a pathway of avoidance. But equally, every time you choose the difficult task, every time you complete those 20 minutes of exercise, you are actively, structurally rewiring your brain for resilience.
That's so powerful.
The brain you have to navigate the world with tomorrow is literally being built by the chemical environment you are creating today.
So the question is, what blueprint are you handing your brain right now?